Hello, everyone, and welcome to AAC in the Cloud. This session will be presented to you by Sharon. We're sorry for a little bit of a late start. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we got it all solved now. So we would like to turn the time over to her to start her presentation. Sharon, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. Welcome to AAC in the Cloud. I'm super excited to be here. Second year presenting here in this great conference, and so I appreciate your time. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about AAC modeling. So if you're new into AAC or you've been doing it for a while, as I have, there's always some tips and tricks. We always run into barriers, and Kelly Fauner and I created this presentation and presented it a couple times together, and she's presented it separately, and so have I, around the US. And what we find is even if you have experience in AAC modeling, we're always running into barriers with trying to implement that within the school setting. So we're going to kind of look at the research today about AAC modeling, some things that you can take back. Our hope by the end of this session is that you'll be able to have some concrete strategies in working with your support staff, and as well as yourself being able to create AAC learners and AAC users. So let's get started. So my name is Sharon Redmon. My background is in special education, just like Kelly's. Special education teacher for almost 20 years now. And I also have taught general education. Got into assistive technology pretty much in college back in the early 90s. And my first experience with AACs, I had a preschool classroom, special education preschool classroom, and trying to figure out how to help my students communicate, and was scouring magazines, trying to find pictures with, laminators, your best friend. And I'm so excited about Velcro. And so I walked into my speech and language pathologist's room, and on the shelf was like this book that was golden for me. It was unbelievable, from Boardmaker, and it had all the pictures on it, and you could take it to your copier and print them off and cut them out. And I just thought that was amazing. And then along came the print or the CD version and the floppy disks. And if any of you are, I'm kind of speaking how old I am, aren't I? So anyway, now we have all these tools that are online and making things so much easier for creating and having symbolic icons to use for communication and communication symbols. So I've had the journey. I've done a lot of things incorrectly. I have tried to do them the right way. I think as we go through, you'll see that there are many right ways, and learning continually evolves. So we want to make sure that we're always assessing what we're doing and then taking it to the next step, and to create opportunities for our students. So today I'm using this, Visme, which is an interactive infographic. And so I hope not to make you dizzy, but I wanted to do something a little bit more unique. You all should have the URL for this. So if you want to follow along, you can. When we get, both Kelly and I, when we have more information, we add this, and it becomes, it's instantaneous. And so you can always come back as things are being updated, and we make sure that all the links are hot and working. So here we go. So aided language, looking at how to help model. So just a little bit of use on using the Visme. When you see this icon, you're going to hover over that when you're using it yourself, so that you can see what is embedded in there. So here we're talking about aided language stimulation, aided language input or modeling. It comes by many, many names, but it's really this process of modeling communication, augmentative alternative communication, and in an everyday setting. And we'll talk a lot about what that looks like. So we're going to be focusing on 6 areas today. Really, what is AAC? It's that a use of these tools and strategies that involve everyday communication challenges. We're going to look at the research and the why AAC modeling is so important, and really talking about that AAC communicator. We know that communication is a basic right, and looking at the different models within ACE, within assistive technology, looking at things like the HAT model, and different models that we know where you start with when you're working with individuals. Uh, the who, and when it comes to AAC, we know that we are going to have those supportive partners. And that's really kind of what we're focusing on today, is how to increase supportive partnership and how to get our partners that are working with AAC users to model and to really give those modeling strategies to them, because they're so important, and how to get over those barriers. And then the how, right? The how of aided language stimulation or modeling. So it sounds like a really easy thing to do. I think this is the area where I've made the most mistakes in how to support my paraeducators and parents within the home and school and community setting on how to do modeling. And so hopefully you'll learn from quite a few of my mistakes. So, but let's first agree and understand. I hope that you've seen these Communication Bill of Rights. If not, there is a link here that takes you to these Communication Bill of Rights. And so we don't have time today to be looking at them and going in deep into them. Kate Ahern has provided this really nice infographic as well for the Communication Bill of Rights with aided language input, right? And the aided language symbols for us to use, those PCSs. So the other piece that we want, so I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that. Please print them out and post them everywhere. I have them in every corner in our building, and make sure that I have them, and I try to print them on non-tearable and waterproof paper, because that way, especially in the day and age that we're at, I'm making sure that everything is clean and they can be cleaned and reused. And then I don't have to laminate, because I'm not a big fan of laminating. So here, the other piece that we're going to do is talk about this presume competence. And this is really important, that we have this presumption going in and working with our AAC users, and understanding that we need to presume this competence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we presume that they have the knowledge. And so just because they don't know how doesn't mean that they can't know how. And we need to see this potential, but not shrug it off because they don't know how. There's a difference between the two. We have to teach our students, and we have to teach our communicative partners on how to use modeling. I really thought that it just comes so naturally and easy to me and makes so much sense, that I thought that I could just say, hey, do this, and people would easily be able to just, model what they're talking about, and found that strategy has never worked. So it's really making sure that we come up with some solid tools that we can use. But the first is starting with an understanding that we presume this potential. Okay, so what is AAC and communication? Well, we're going to look at this unaided communication, have a little background, and versus aided communication. And we know that unaided communication are areas like vocalization, facial expression, sign language, gestures, anything that comes from you that you don't need an aid or an outside device to be able to help you with. So aided communication are things like those letters, words, speech generating devices, single switches, pictures, symbols that are low tech. All of that is aided to your communication. And what we're going to go and look at now is this AAC, this multimodality, and where we use all modes of communicating within AAC. So we're going to accept, and this is a really important piece, especially when implementing AAC, is that we accept all forms of communication. So mistake number one, back in early childhood, we sit down for snack. We put the picture communication symbols down and we're like, what do you want? And they have two choices and they only have two pictures. And then a child doesn't respond because they probably don't want anything that I have there, but I haven't given them an opportunity. Or they then look and they point to something else. And I'm like, no, you need to pick between these two. What do you want? You need to use symbols to communicate. And so I wasn't honoring other modes of communication and quickly learned that I need to. All of us communicate in different ways and we use different modes of communicating throughout the day. So we use body language, facial expressions, vocalizations. We use written expression to communicate. All of those are acceptable means, and we need to start accepting them and making sure that when we're working with students, if they use joint attention and they're nonverbal, but they're looking at the toy that they want and it's not an option that I've given them, which is really testing, right? When we only give them two things, we're just testing their knowledge and testing their how they're going to understand receptively and try to get them to speak expressively in the mode that we want them to. But then I have a student that has joint attention and looks at a different toy. And if I don't honor that, then I'm missing out on vital information, learning about what is important to that student and missing out and making that connection with them. And that they're not going to trust me if I'm not responding to modes of communication that work for them at that moment. And then be able to scaffold that and then to bring them into learning different modes, such as picture communication symbols or speech generating devices. And we need to really start with where they are at and always honoring all forms of communication. So why? Why should we be modeling AAC? So we know the problem is that, and I'm sure many of you have seen Jane Corson's information here in this research, where really you're looking at what 18-month-old child is exposed to with oral language, and then how long that would take for a child that speaks AAC and how long that would take. And 84 years is just ridiculous. That's not an option. 20 years is not an option. We need to increase. The whole reason of modeling AAC is we need to increase that opportunities throughout the day so we can reduce this number. 20 to 30 minutes in a speech room is not where this should be happening. It should be happening in our classrooms. It should be happening on the playground. It should be happening in the hallway, in the lunchroom, on the bus, at home. We should be modeling everywhere in all communication functions. So we also look at this. I love this chart came from a research study where it was comparing AAC modeling of verbal language to an average 3-year-old just within 1 week. And here we know we have, over 100,000 words that are modeled in the spoken language, where here in AAC, and this is, with some pretty robust pieces in place for modeling throughout the day, that we're at 2,400. So we know that there's a huge gap, and we need to close this gap in modeling language for individuals. And that takes a whole village. It just doesn't take the speech and language pathologist, or hopefully your special education teacher is right there in making sure this is happening. It takes the occupational therapist, physical therapist, parents, gen ed teachers, and our paraeducators, if they have a one-on-one or have a classroom support in place, that is really looking at modeling more, because this gap can't close without pulling everyone in the whole team in. One person just can't do it. Okay, so we know it's best practice. We know that we need to model AAC. We need to model it across settings. We need to model it across people. I like to think of when we are modeling AAC, when different people are modeling, it's like talking with verbal kids, like talking with different relatives, and their speech patterns are different, or their dialects are a little different. So it is an interesting thing to be able to do it across people, because you're going to have a different experience with that communication and with that modeling. So it's really important to make sure that we set up those, we set that up for success and set that up for individuals. And so how do we do that? So really what it came down to is I started looking at, like, I've tried all these versions. I've gone and talked with my paraeducators and said, okay, here you go. So in your day, just, you walk into a room and the first thing you see, I want you to model. That didn't work. Okay, well, I want you to model at least an hour of day. You pick what works for you. What would you like to do? That didn't work. It was too open-ended. There were all these barriers that kept coming up, and I couldn't understand what they were. And so we just sat down and we had a nice session where I looked at and talked with parents and talked with paraeducators about what are the barriers, what's going on here. And over and over, across schools, across districts, across different states. I've taught in Wisconsin, I've taught in Washington State, I've taught overseas. And consistently, these are the responses that I've received. So this whole idea of it feels silly, it makes me feel stupid, it's so slow. We really had to look at this perception as being a barrier and how to deal with these perceptions. And so having and sitting down and really exploring this with my staff and acknowledging that yes, that it does feel silly, it is slow. And we really have to think about that. Like, let's put ourselves now and kind of reach out and say, well, how do our students feel? Do you think it makes them feel a little silly? Do you think it makes that it is slow for them? And it is. And if we're asking them to do it, then we just kind of need to, we need to put on our big girl pants and we need to figure it out, right? So, and that really helped. It really helped to sit down and just kind of talk about those barriers and what they looked like. And then it also helped that I shared my own experience and saying, I feel the same way. I felt the same way at the beginning. And then showing them then how that can be. And in real life situations, look, it's really slow. Here I'm modeling. Oops, I made a mistake, and that's going to happen. Let me correct that. So really sitting down, like I said, and unlocking those barriers and creating a different narrative and having different perceptions, really understanding what those perceptions are and changing those around. One of my support staffs, she's like, what if someone walks in and sees me talking to myself and I'm just pointing? And I'm like, then I would be ecstatic, right? So with the kids, they see their communication system being modeled. That is huge. So we need to be able to do that. And another big piece that we saw in this, having over and over again, and this was it was shocking, because I with this one, where I don't know where the words are, and I've over the years have tried to explain that's okay, just use the words that you know. Here's how we search for words. And just really digging down to where they see where they need to be teaching and what they need to be teaching and how they need to be teaching this or modeling this was really the crux of this issue. And so I had to start out slow, and I had to start out with teaching one piece at a time and then celebrating those successes. So the word I want is never there. We really worked on, again, using a search within the systems to be able to find that. And then talk about and explore, if a student didn't know or didn't have the word that they wanted, right? There's only so many words that can be packed into an AAC system. So if they didn't have the words, what would they do? What could be a repair strategy that they could use to come up with something close? And let's model that. And so we did a lot of practicing, just with us, in a safe environment, and then started practicing with students. And that really seemed to be that bridge in that understanding, to help people, again, break down those barriers and the perceptions. Takes too long to find a word, I lose them. They see a user's not paying attention, so why bother? And we really talked a lot about that they are paying attention. Maybe they're not paying attention 100% of the time, but if we catch them 60% of the time, that's 60% more modeling than what they had before. And so we need to find then, and also listen to our AAC users and find areas of when they start shutting down. How long do I have to find a word or to model this before they check out? How do I keep them engaged, right? And understanding that it is not our AAC users' job, it's our job. It is our job to keep them engaged. It's our job to model. It's our job to adjust. It is our job. It is not their failure. It is ours. And that's okay. That is okay for us to fail as long as we are understanding what that looks like, and then how to go back and repair that and try again. So, and that's a hard pill to swallow. It's hard for us to say that what we're doing is wrong and oops, I made a mistake. And to say that, and I think this is in teaching in general, that even in the general education setting, that if students aren't learning, it's not their job, it's our job. We failed our students haven't failed us. So we need to find what works best for them. We need to build relationships, and we need to make sure that we are constantly assessing our teaching. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes things fail, and then we need to repair that. Okay, I have lots of soapboxes, but I appreciate you sticking out with me and keeping through this. So overall, working with my dear friend, Davina Penny, a speech and language pathologist in Wisconsin, we really felt like it was just so overwhelming to model every word, that it was too much pressure, and there wasn't enough success. And so when we started, again, breaking down these barriers about perceptions, restarting a new narrative about what this looks like, acknowledging with our parents and with our support staff that this is hard and it's not easy, and it's coming to the table with a changed perception in myself and saying, this is tough stuff. This is not easy. It may be easy for me, but I've been doing it for 20 years. So it's not easy for everyone. And we need to make sure that we acknowledge that, and then help our individuals, supporting staff, AAC support staff, figure out what works for them. So we really, like she said, we needed to change our mindset and our approach. And that's when we became a team full of successful AAC moments, which is really powerful. And so it's starting with these conversations, again, starting with the perceptions, and then starting on how to change the barriers. Okay. Usually I stop and ask if there are any questions, but I think we're going to be doing that at the end. If you have questions, you can put them in the Slack. And then we'll be able to take a look at those at the end. So if you have one, keep those in mind and jot them down. I'm happy to save some time where we are. Okay. So we have, I think, about 22 more minutes. So, and we'll keep those at the end. All right. So I also I wanted to reach out to parents. Megan has 2 boys that are highly impacted by their autism. And it was an interesting talk, and I've known her for years now, and we still talk a lot about this, that when I was trying to help her, and it took us a couple of years for her to see the power in modeling AAC. And I thought that this was interesting, so I want to read it out loud. She said, I think the biggest hurdle for me was that I felt like just because the boys couldn't talk, that didn't mean that they couldn't hear. So I looked at it like, why would I model with an iPad when I just don't want them to respond to my voice because their ears work just fine? So I had to really adjust my thinking to understanding how they learn and process language, and to the fact that it was going to give them extra exposures to their words, and I could talk at the same time. And that is a huge, still gives me like, it gives me tingles, like I get goosebumps every time I read this. And watching and having that journey with her and taking her from that place, and really having the patience and working with her to change that narrative, I think it was so powerful. And now her house is plastered with strategies, and they speak AAC in their house, and everyone that comes in helps model AAC, and it's such a beautiful thing to see. You can find Megan on Facebook too. You can always message her. She's always willing to speak AAC parent language to anybody, and to help parents kind of look in how to take that journey. So really powerful stuff in switching that narrative, understanding again, really digging down with parents. What is the barrier? What is the perception that you have with this? And how can we adjust that? And I would have never known if we didn't ask that question. I could just still be banging my head against the wall, just like, why won't you model? It's so easy to do. But instead I really had to really be thoughtful and have patience and time to be able to figure out what really was the barrier and to change that. So Megan also said she felt like the hardest part is just starting. She's like, it becomes second nature after a while. And I think that that's where us that have been modeling for a long time, where that gap kind of starts. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, so it's so second nature to me and it feels so easy. But I have to remember, in the beginning when we started, it wasn't that easy. So, and you just have to start. So, and the biggest obstacle for her was not seeing the point. The boys didn't seem responsive in the moment, so it's easy to think it was not helping at all, which goes back up to that, the AAC users not paying attention, so why bother? But they are paying attention, and we need to bring lots and lots of opportunities for them and create very exciting interactions so that they want to participate in this with us and they want to see, and then we'll start using this. I'm very excited. Actually, let me go back up. Sorry to make you dizzy. Very excited. The other day, Megan shared with me that one of her youngest son started using an adapted bike, and then texted his grandmother for the first time and said, "Granny, bike now, please," and using his AAC system. And he's going into third grade. I mean, it's just such a huge, huge piece. And now he's a third grader speaking AAC, using a system, and communicating with his grandmother. And that's just so powerful to do. It was very exciting. I cried when I heard that. So, all because of the work that the whole team was doing, and that included the parents, and bringing them in and breaking down those barriers, figuring out what was stopping it. So we really want to now give you kind of some strategies. So I've kind of sprinkled them in as we've been going, but really kind of focus on them. So we have this communication triangle in that we talk about: the what, the who, the how. And I love this piece from Kelly Fauner. She's like, if you want to have a symbol talker, you need to be a symbol talker too. And, adults, we need visual supports to remind us all day long. I plaster these things all over the place so that we have these reminders, right? I mean, we have visual supports within our community. I'm very thankful that there are stop signs in the community, even though people have known that stop sign has been there forever, right? It reminds us that, yes, you need to stop. Even though it seems like the right thing to do, you have to have these reminders in our rooms, in our lives, to remind us the important pieces. So put these visual supports up, create them is a great strategy in helping our support staff within the school or even with at home. I have sticky notes. I'm a sticky note queen. I have them all over the place to help me, to remind me of the things that are important and the things that we're doing. Those that need to be up on a more permanent basis, I create them, I have them, but then I move them around, right? I don't want us to satiate to and just ignore them as just a picture on the wall and you don't see it anymore. So every 6 weeks or so, I'll take them and move them around so that it keeps it fresh and keeps it going. But really having visual supports with these strategies really is a huge piece for the whole team to remember what is it that is important and what is it that we're doing. So that what. Also, it helps with the how. So how to do that. And so I post small pieces that change throughout the year that take us from one point and are leading us to where we want to be with modeling, and put them up around the school as well. So the who is really that IEP team, which includes the parents. And so I often try to give these supports to parents as well, so that they can have them and use them, and then sit and have a conversation like, what works for you? Where do you need them? Are you okay with having them in your home? What does that look like? So I'm really having and personalizing those pieces to the family. So this communication triangle. And for some reason, sorry about that, but my how link is broken. I'll make sure that gets fixed. And remember that the how is really important. We touched on this earlier, communication functions, right? I want to build this AAC agency. I want this to be our student first, right? We know with the HAT model, with different models out there in AT, that the human being is first. We start with the individual, right? The SEP model, student is the first one that comes in, right? And then, so we want to start with the student and the communication functions. We don't want to be stuck at the preschool table and for snack and giving a testing item of 50-50 chance you want this or this. Oh, sorry, you can't have that snack because I don't have a picture that shows. So, and you have to show me using AAC. We need to break away from that model, and we need to look at AAC as communication functions around their day, right? So, and I love this. I haven't seen the whole webinar. I know Karen Erickson and Caroline Musselwhite did a webinar a couple of weeks ago with Bill Blanco, and it was talking about this idea, this AAC agency of control, right? So we have individuals that have dependencies, and so how can they control their dependencies? How can they be independent in that nature? So making sure they have ability to control, making sure that they can comment, that they can label, that they can do requesting, right? Or they describe or protest, that kids can protest. That's great. No, I don't want that. Oh, awesome. Individuals get to have that. Everyone gets to say, no, that doesn't work for me, right? And so we have to allow that, and we have to honor that, and then build from that and bring individuals along and create opportunities so that we can have maybe some yeses that come into that, right? So sharing our feelings, like all of these are really important. It's just not about what do you want? It's just not about wants. It's about all of this. So really taking these communication functions, and I write them in a row or in a list form, and then together with my support staff, I say, okay, throughout your day, where do you think that you could model commenting? Where do you think that you could model refusing? Not making it so that the student has to respond, but you as an adult are showing this model, that it does not require a student response at all. This is all about the AAC communication partner modeling. Where can you show where you're labeling? Where can you model greeting? And I create a checklist. And so that at the end of the day, we can send this home. Today, I spoke AAC in these areas, and it's great data to be able to have. And it keeps everyone honest, right? Like, oh, I only talked about it, I only did in the area of requesting, modeling that today. Boy, tomorrow I really need to be better at commenting or labeling. So how can I see that visually and keep track? And I have found that these checklists work really, really well. And not just as some data collection, but also as a visual reminder, right? Throughout my day as an AAC support person, I need to make sure that I go through these communication functions. So a great strategy that has worked really well for many people. So I haven't tried it in the home yet, and maybe Megan would be willing to be my guinea pig with that. So, and I have new families this year. I'm hoping that they take that journey with me because I'd love to see that. Anybody else use that or trial that with their support staff or trial it in the home, kind of using these communication function checklists and creating something? Let me know. Please reach out. Please reach out. I'd love to see how people are doing that. So here's some solutions. So, starting again, so looking at the environment